Hey, it's Kevin Wood here and welcome back to the Mixing in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about gain staging. So firstly, if you're new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So gain staging. All right, this is, it's a fairly popular topic. I've seen it around everywhere. I've done videos on it myself. So we're going to incorporate some of that content in here in this course, obviously. So gain staging, I guess the history of gain staging was more around the fact of, there's a couple of factors. One was that, they were using, say, professional vintage hardware, and they had basically, let's say, a sweet spot in them where you push your audio through the device at a certain level and it imparts the best sound that it has. Now, whether that's pushing it a little bit harder so it gets a little bit of extra distortion or just some character from the hardware unit, whatever it is, they usually had a VU meter on them and you tried to target around 0 or something like that, which you gain stage your equipment to. It gave you the best sound, the best quality, etc. The other reason is that back, when they used to use tapes all the time, tapes were notoriously noisy, right? They had a lot of hiss, they had a lot of noise. Same with the environments, the microphones, all that sort of stuff. So what you wanted to do is make sure that your volume of your audio, your instruments, your vocals, was at a level that was high enough that it basically made that noise, that noise floor, as they called it, so low that it was not as perceivable. If you recorded too low in volume, then your noise floor would be here and it would be extremely noisy compared to the level of your audio. Today, that stuff is basically gone away, right? You still may use some external hardware that has a sweet spot, so I'm not saying it's entirely gone away, but in the digital world where we're using computers and everything else, and we're using audio interfaces that are extremely clean, that the noise floor problem is almost been eradicated to a point, let's just say. So we don't necessarily need to do it for those purposes anymore. We still want to get a decent level in our tracks because you still can get a bit of a noise floor from your room and all that sort of stuff. So we don't want to make it too low, but that's not always you pushing the gain staging up. The main reason I like to do gain staging is for a couple of reasons, right? So if we just talk about using stock standard plugins, the reason I would do it for that is more of a process, a workflow, that sort of thing. What I want to do is avoid clipping, okay? So where previously you may have used analog gear that when pushed would get into some sort of distortion and would impart, a nice distortion, okay? An analog style distortion that some people wanted, made it sound good, blah, blah, blah. In the digital world, a lot of the times if you push, you go into digital clipping, which is a horrible distortion. It's not a nice distortion. It just sounds terrible. It sounds like you've destroyed the sound and all this sort of stuff, right? So we want to avoid that. So properly gain staging our audio, make sure that we avoid going into any sort of digital clipping. We do not, ruin the sound of our recordings or our mixing or whatever else. And we get the best, cleanest, nicest results out of it. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have distortion on your tracks, but what you would do is you would use plugins, you would use things that were designed for it that, created a nice distortion, that sort of thing. Now the other reason I like to gain stage as opposed from just workflow and making sure that we never clip at any stage through our mix is that sometimes if I'm not using stock plugins, I'll use third-party plugins that emulate analog hardware, and some of those plugins emulate it so well that they have a sweet spot. You still want to target a certain spot on the meter on that plugin, and it will give you a nice analog style distortion. And you know, that's just because they're emulating the hardware. They want to emulate it the best that they can. So whether you do gain staging or not is really entirely up to you. I mean, I obviously suggest that you try to avoid clipping where possible, trying to get the best results out of your audio wherever you can. But for me, it's a very obsessive workflow technique. I'll gain stage at every area. So I'll gain stage the audio as it's coming into my tracks. I'll gain stage the tracks going into the buses. I'll gain stage the buses going into the mix bus and the mix bus going out, right? So I'll do gain staging at all the various levels, just because maybe it's because I'm a bit obsessive. Who knows? Maybe a lot of you might agree with doing it. Maybe you disagree with it. It's sort of almost an option now, but you know, you should have a certain level of gain staging, in my opinion, but not, you know, maybe you don't have to go to the degree that I do, but that's entirely up to you. But let's get into Cubase and I'll show you some techniques and how I do it.
Now, in my case here, I like to start from one sort of side and go to the other. So for instance, let's start by, I started a new mix I've brought in some tracks. The first thing I want to do is I want to set the level of the actual raw audio files that are brought into the project, so that they're at a nice level, that they're not clipping or anything like that. Now, there's two components with this. One is, let's say I solo this kick drum here. The first thing I want to look at here is, if I assume that I'm not using any plugins, I'm doing this totally digital based, no analog emulation plugins or anything like that, then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to set my gain of my audio to target somewhere around, you know, -12 here, -18 dB on the meter. This is giving me a lot of room to move when I add plugins and I do various things. I do not want to be up here at 0 and even 6. I could go to 6 if I wanted to go a little bit hotter, but I'm still pushing it there. I'm not leaving a lot of room. And we've got to remember, we're going to add all of these instruments together further down the track, and they're going to feed into another bus somewhere along the line. So the louder we have all of these, the more we're going to push it into the next layer. So I want to target around here. So if I was to play the kick, you'll see it's sitting pretty much on 12 there. Now, how do I adjust that? This is going to depend on your DAW. I'm pretty sure the majority of them have something in the line of a clip gain facility. And that is where I'm not turning the fader up or down on the actual track. Right, so let's say here's the fader. I'm not going to adjust that. What I'm adjusting here is the actual level of the audio track. Now in Cubase here, I can grab this dot here and I can move it down. So if we watch our meter now, I can bring it down to whatever level I want. So now what I'm doing is I'm setting the level of the audio track to a nice level that I'm happy with before I even touch a fader. So this is not getting the kick to the right level in the mix. This is getting the kick to the right level just coming into the mix, so that it's sitting at the right level here. After that, and this is not gain staging, this is mixing. That's when we're going to start moving the fader to make all the instruments gel together and be mixed. Right now I'm just concentrating on gain staging, and what I don't want is, if I push this to the other realm, I don't want my kick up here, and what I definitely don't want is for this to be clipping or going really high. That is bad. We don't want that. Now unfortunately, I do get a lot of mixes where that's what I get. I will get audio tracks from a client that has recorded them, and they are that hot. And the first thing I do is bring them back down to the level that I want. And like I said, I bring it all the way down to sit around somewhere between the 6 and 18. That's up to you where you want it to be. -12, that's pretty good. So I'll aim for about there. It's a nice level. Now, to go even further though, what I do is, because I like to use some analog emulations, and in the case of this, just as an example, I am using the Slate Digital virtual channel here, and I've got it on a Brit 4K, which is an SSL 4K console. So I'm emulating a console here, an analog console. Now what you'll notice here is that it has a VU meter. So when I actually do this, because I know I'm putting this on every track, I have that in my template prior. Okay, and if you look at this setting here, when I click on this control here, the VU is set to -18 dB. So 0 on here is -18 dB. So if I want a nice signal that's getting some analog warmth, but it's not distorting or clipping, what I do is I bring up this and then play my audio, and I set my clip gain to suit this meter. If I find it's doing that, then it's too hot, and I'll bring it down, just sitting at about where I feel it's not peaking too much. It's also not down here where it's not really getting any character of the plugin. I'm trying to hit about 0. Now again, there's no rules, there's no reason why you can't push this into the red and clip it. That's entirely up to you, because this emulates analog gear. That is actually acceptable to do that, because you will get the distortion, the emulation distortion of the analog gear. So that might be something you want to go for. But if you're not trying to go for that distortion effect and you just want to get some of this analog warmth, I always target around 0. So I'll do that on every track. I'll go through every track looking at these plugins or looking at my meters if I'm not using the plugins, and I'll set the clip gain on each one of those. Once I've done that, then I start mixing. Okay, and when I start mixing, I'll get my levels to where I want them, and everything will be good. But then what I want to do is, because from here I then feed them to other buses. So for instance, in the case of this one here, you'll notice that I've got all these instruments, guitars, whatever it is, and they all come along my chain, and where they end up on is another set of buses. So in the case of here, I've got a kick, drum stem, drum kit stem, bass stem, guitar stem, etc. So what I want to do here, again, I'm emulating the analog, but if I'm not, I can look at the meter here, and I might decide that when I play this, again, I don't want this hitting too hard, I want it sitting around here. So again, because I'm doing this analog emulation, now with this one here, I'm using the mix bus version because these are on the buses. Now what I want to do again is I might want to still only target 0. So I'll play my kick drum, and it's hitting a bit hard here. So in this case here, if I wasn't happy with how hard that would be hitting, I would then go back, and I would have to then I would use the faders. So for instance here, I've got 3 kick drums. I would use the faders and turn them all down equally, because I don't want to change the mix of the kick, I want to change them all down equally, so that they're only hitting around 0 on here. Or if I want them to hit harder, I push them up so they hit harder. Okay, but that's where I do the faders, because I've got the clip gain of the audio working well on the track. Now these faders are what is determining how hard I'm hitting this bus. So then I'm going to adjust those levels using this bus. Now in Cubase, and you might have it in your software, I have this great feature called VCAs. So I can actually do that with the VCAs. I can configure all my kick drums to be controlled by this one VCA, and I can adjust the volume up or down of all those kicks together in their relative state. So I'll play it and I'll show you. So this is adjusting all of the faders on the kick. So if I was to go all the way back to the kick, you'll see they're all extremely low now because the VCA has moved all of those. So we can push it back up, we can go hotter or lower, whatever you want. So what I would do is I might do that across all of the buses. So I will come across here and I would check the rest of the drum kit. You know, how hard is it hitting? Where do I want it? It's not always going to be at 0. It's going to depend on the elements. Once I'm happy with that, then you might go to the next level. So all of these buses here then feed into a main full mix bus. So all of these individual buses feed into this one. And in this one here, in my case, I then have a tape emulator. So what I might want to do on this one, let's just turn the volume down. I might want to be hitting this tape so that I can get some nice character of the tape around 0, or I might want to push it up to get a little bit more tape emulation and a bit more distortion and push it up into the red. And I would do that by adjusting all of the faders on here. Again, we don't want to change the balance between them because that's our mix. Right? We don't want to stuff that up. We just want to place them all together. So you'll see here the entire song is hitting this at around 0. So that then gives us what we actually want in character from the tape. Now again, I have configured all of these buses here. As you can see here, it says stem VCA. So I can actually, with this VCA, control all of those faders with one control, and they all stay relative to where they were, and that will determine how hot I hit that tape. I can go up and hit it harder or lower. Now the advantage of this is that if I always, on every one of my mixes, do that and get all those gain stages going through and always hit this tape at the end of 0, then every single one of my mixes is always the same loudness, because every step of the way I've gain staged and I've hit it to 0.
So there you go, that's how I gain stage in Cubase and what I do in my mixes there. So there's probably a couple of techniques that I've showed there. So different ways to do it depending on your software and the way you like to do it if you are going to do gain staging. Let me know your thoughts on gain staging in the comments. I'd like to hear opinions. Do you gain stage? Do you agree with it, disagree with it? All those sort of things. Love to hear your opinion. If you have any questions, if I didn't explain something clear enough or it doesn't translate to your software or anything like that, again, feel free to put it in the comments. I do read all the comments and I'll answer as many of the questions and comments as I can, as quick as I can. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.